I'm Robert Lefever, I'm the director of the Promis Recovery Centre. What we're hoping to do with these short clips is to help people to understand the nature of addiction and what can be done about it. Would you like the joke of the day? Joke of the day? This chap just coming up to his 100th birthday, and the family wondered what on earth to give him for a present, until some bright spark suggested sending him round a hooker. And so they did. And on the day in question, she comes round, she knocks on the door, and he says, "Yush." And she says, "I'm here to give you super sex." And he says, oh, thanks. I'll take the soup. There has to be fun in recovery, otherwise it's not worth having. You know, if we go from being gloomy and doomy and all the rest of it to being gloom and doomy, what's changed? It's Anthony Hopkins, who's glad for himself to be known as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, who says that if recovery is gloom, doom, ginger ale and Jesus, I don't want it. Now, give or take the Jesus, I'm not making a point, nor is he, about Christianity. But what he's making a point about is the capacity to change, to really enjoying one's life, having the crack. And for those of you who don't know what crack is, it's spelled C-R-A-I-Q, is it? C. C-R-A-I-C. It's the Irish word for having a crack, you know, going for it, having the fun. And you've got to have that in recovery. Every so often you'll meet this chap in recovery, you know, "I haven't had a drink for 20 years. And you think, why not? What was the point of getting into recovery if that's what it's going to be like? It has to be fun. It has to be, you know, what life's all about. Yeah. Now, let's look at this lot. Spotting early addiction. The booklet I wrote on identifying addictive behaviour in childhood was written for the children themselves, age 6, 7, 8, because you can diagnose children with addiction problems at that age, long before they've ever used an addictive substance or process. You can see the characteristic behaviour. You can see the tendency to be isolated. You can see the fact that they've come from an addictive family. You can see them being easily hurt. You know, they're miserable the whole time. They feel that life's been particularly unfair to them. You can see they're easily frustrated. "I want that one." "Okay, have that one." "No, I want 2 of them." "Okay, have 2 of them." "No, I want the blue one." "All right, have the blue." "No, I want the one that Lucy's got." "Oh, Jesus." You know, you can see the frustration. You can see those characteristics coming out at the age 6, 7, 8. Now, you might say, well, all children are like that. And it's true. They are to some extent. An addictive child is adolescence writ large, writ in capital letters. It's the adolescent from hell. And you will see that, age 6, 7, 8. Now, by and large, that child would be diagnosed as either being depressed or having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I am not too keen on those diagnoses. And I was very glad yesterday to receive a letter from a consultant psychiatrist who's had considerable experience of looking after juveniles. And he said, time and time again, the people that we see as addicts have been diagnosed as having attention deficit hyperactivity disorder when they were younger. Now, there's a trap there that you need to be careful about, because people say exactly the same about bulimia being related to early childhood sexual abuse. And it is true that many people with bulimia have been sexually abused in childhood. But that doesn't mean that the sexual abuse led to the bulimia. What I'm afraid it does mean is there's a lot of sexual abuse. Because there's lots of people who've been sexually abused who didn't become bulimic. So you cannot say that the abuse led to the bulimia, that A led to B. It didn't. Equally, you cannot prove that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder necessarily leads to addiction. But unlike the association between abuse and bulimia, the relationship between attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and addiction is much closer. Time and again, we see patients who have been diagnosed as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder patients, and you do see, if you follow them up, that they do develop addictive tendencies. The proof that I think is absolute is that ADHD gets better when you prescribe Ritalin. Well, it would. Ritalin's an amphetamine. And people with an addictive tendency do very well on amphetamines. They do very well on cocaine. They do very well on heroin. They do very well on any mood-altering drug. And consequently, the very fact that it does get better on Ritalin is evidence to me that it is the forerunner of an addictive tendency. If you give a normal child amphetamines, they just go wild. If you give somebody who's got an addictive potential amphetamines, they actually feel better. Because the inner craving, the inner emptiness is being satisfied. And so the way to diagnose children is not to go searching their bedrooms for funny shaped envelopes or, you know, strands of a cocaine or a burnt spoon or whatever. Just look at their behavior and you will see it. And exactly the same is true for companies. Don't go looking for anything other, you know, doing random drug tests or alcohol tests or whatever. Just look at your personnel files. If you look at the personnel files, you will see totally unreliable, you know, they don't understand timetable, clients perpetually let down, high incidence of death of grandmothers and other, you know, causes for absenteeism, secretaries who just can't work with them, lovely fellow but I just can't work with him, and so on. You'll see the consequences of the behaviour, of the addictive potential, coming out right across the board. And you will see exactly that in childhood. Now, the middle classes like their children to do well at school, and therefore we have a number of diagnoses which explain when our children do not. Dyslexia is one, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is another one, depression is a third. We love to have these explanations that account for our children to have a particular problem that we can understand, and we can say, ah, now I understand it, now it explains everything. And I don't make myself terribly popular when I say, well, actually, that child's an addict in the making. Well, you can understand that. None of us votes for that. We don't want our children to have an addictive potential. We want the problem to be either with the school or with, you know, something, you know, intellectual, such as dyslexia or whatever. I'm not saying dyslexia doesn't exist. It does. But what I'm saying is that it's vastly overdiagnosed. The same as myalgic encephalopathy, ME, yuppie flu, is vastly overdiagnosed. There are people who genuinely have got ME as a result of exposure to the Epstein-Barr virus. And they get very depressed and they can't cope and all the rest of it. And they have genuine ME. But it's what I call a bandwagon disease. Other people jump on that bandwagon and say, yes, I got it too, and there's no evidence for it. Well, I feel tired, and I feel lonely, and I feel this, and I feel that. And they're all trying to jump on the bandwagon of people who have genuine illness. And the same thing happens with dyslexia, and the same thing happens with ADHD and other reasons for childhood disturbance. And quite commonly, what we find is the actual cause behind it was an addictive nature.